By the age of 9, I was in a street gang, standing out on a corner, drinking alcohol, smoking cigarettes, and he told me, "You're the lead on this, bro. You take him in the bedroom, you put the pillow over his head, and you shoot." My second burglary, I was 7. While I was doing it, people came home. By the time I was 18, I already had 4 felonies. I sold to the crew from Scarface.
Is Al Pacino bang on it?
No comment. You know what he said to me the first day he got out? He said, "You got to get me a gun."
Can you trust anybody?
That's a difficult question. And I've had a lot of training with weapons. Yeah, and I slept with it next to me. Told them what I saw. And they looked at me and said, "Let's get him. You must return everything." There is not a f***ing chance that I'm returning anything. This is a robbery. Don't make it a murder. I'm that f***ing guy who was destined for nothing. I'm the guy from the other side of the tracks. I'm the person who maybe wasn't supposed to make it. And somehow I did. And it wasn't easy.
Welcome back to the Terry Stone Connection, and today we've got a very important guest. He's flown in from Mexico, but he was brought up and raised in Chicago. When you say things like the Italian mafia, the Colombian cartels, drugs, and cigar smuggling, you get the picture. So please put your hands together for Mr. Scott Anthony in the building.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
You're welcome. I have a question for you.
Go on then.
Am I the first person from America who's been on your show?
No, you're the second.
Okay.
The first was Michael Franchise.
Oh, Michael was on your show.
Yeah, Michael Franchise, yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. I want to meet Michael, and I'll tell you why. I've been around the mob. My mother was from Italy, and I grew up in a couple different neighborhoods in Chicago, and all the mob guys that I've ever met or known or seen in my life, they were a little crude. They were a little rough around the edges, and Michael Franchise is smooth.
He is.
He's well spoken. He's calm. He looks like he carries himself like a diplomat. He could have been a Don.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, we had a bit of a laugh because when he came on the show, I said, "You're our first Italian mafia guest." So I said, "We have to do the ring kissing ceremony." So he said, "That's just in the fucking movies." But we had a bit of a laugh. And Michael, I mean, great story, great guest. But obviously, we're not here to talk about Michael.
Okay.
We're here to talk about you. And for all of our viewers and listeners, now they probably won't know your story. They may have heard of you through the boxing world, or maybe through, if they follow sort of organised crime in America. But I'd love for you just to literally go, take us back to sort of where you were born, where you were raised, and what it was like growing up, and how your childhood was.
Well, the first thing I want to say is they don't know of me and wouldn't have maybe heard of me by design, because I always say, and I when I first started writing my book, I had, I would make notes and I would write down, and a really good criminal and the best criminal is quiet and never discovered. So people have said to me, well, the young people mostly, "Why aren't you famous?" Because the famous guys are either dead or in prison for a long time.
True story.
Yeah. That's it. So I was born in Chicago to an Italian American family, but my father wasn't. My father was an outsider, which they called a Mitigan, an American and a non-Italian, and that made my life complicated. And my father was wild, and he left when I was 4. So he left when I was 4, and then I had my grandfather, who was the backbone of our family, great Italian man, and he died when I was 7. And that was it. My mother said at about 8 years old, she was helping me, took the training wheels off the bike, and I was riding. I said, "F*** you." And she said, "That's it. I knew I lost my son." And she was correct. By the age of 9, I was in a street gang. Simon City Royals for my Royal brothers out there. They love to hear it.
Love that.
and I did that up until about 16 years old. My mother moved to the suburbs. We were forced. We had nowhere else to go. They kicked us out of everywhere we lived because I was just a ruthless villain. And when I went to the suburbs, I saw real life. The inner city, the bad neighborhoods are way different. We walked a different way, spoke a different way. I basically spoke a dialect. I didn't speak English.
Right.
I met these young girls in the suburb. because I was kind of pursuing their beautiful older sister.
Right.
They invited me in. I was 14. They were 9 or 10. And I sat there and they were talking about culture, history, geography. And I didn't know shit. I felt like an idiot. And they didn't know it, luckily. And I left that house like a dog with the tail between its legs. And I walked home thinking, you want to be a dummy? You're going to be an idiot your whole life. You don't even know how to speak. Those girls just, they ran circles around me and everything. And they were 9 or 10 years old. And I said, that's it. And then I had to go to court. I had a court appearance, and I went to court, and they put the handcuffs on me, and they said they were going to send me to juvenile prison until I was 18 because there was no monitoring me, and I never went to school. And I, for the first time in my life, I acted like a young man, and I asked to please speak. Can I please speak? And they took me out of the cell. They took me in front of the judge, and I said, please give me an opportunity. I told them the story, what happened with the girls, and I said, I promise I'll be at school on Monday. What do you lose? This was a Friday, but there's a backstory. What do you lose? They gave me a chance. They said, okay, you got until Monday. If you're not there, you're gone. I had my right-hand man from the gang there, had a screwdriver in his pocket. We had a stolen car outside of the court. We walked out of court, got in the stolen car, drove it from Chicago, X amount of hours, I think back then. It might have been 8 hours because it was snowing, to Detroit, Michigan. I never drove a car before. And I remember on the highway and the trucks would go past. Anyway, we got back to Chicago. He went one way, I went another way. We abandoned the car, and I never missed a day of school from that day on. I educated myself.
But before that, leading up to the court thing, obviously you said that you was, a delinquent, basically.
No, I was worse than a delinquent.
Right.
I was a force to be reckoned with on the street by that point.
I mean, what age would you say? Was it literally after your grandfather passed?
It was at 9 years old. At 9 years old, I was standing out on a corner, drinking alcohol, smoking cigarettes, got a tattoo on my arm, a cross, at 14 years old in a hallway with a needle and thread inside of the Indian ink. And they put it on because everyone was getting them. The only people who had tattoos in 1974 were sailors and criminals. That was it.
Because they used to call them prison tats.
That's it. That's exactly what it was. And I hit the streets running, and a lot of people, they've been criticizing me over the gang talk, and it's stupid. Yeah, it's stupid. But when I was 14, it was exhilarating. It was amazing. We fought all day. We robbed. We stole. Never paid for anything. You wanted something, you figured a way out to get it.
I mean, people who judge people say, "Oh, it was stupid." But the thing is, I do have a real view that if you are brought up in a certain environment, you become a product of that environment.
100%.
If you're in the hood and people are like rob, stealing, cheating, killing, stabbing, you end up going, right, okay, well, this is what we do. Do you know?
And you're going to blame me for excelling at it? I did well at it. Right. And when you show potential at anything in the world, there is always going to be somebody with vision that says, I can do something. It's the same thing in celebrity, in entertainment, in sports. If you see a young guy, I'll give you an example. Jeff Fennick, the Australian boxer, he was seen in a club fighting, and he was seen by somebody who worked for a newspaper. There was a man there, Bill Morty. He was in, I think he ran a newspaper, and somebody came back and said, Bill, I saw this guy. He can fight. He goes, I don't want anything to do with boxing. No, you got to see him. They saw talent. People saw talent in me. So they would say, I was a prolific burglar at an early age. And I had this older guy that he used to use me to go in and do it, because when you're a juvenile in the U.S. at that time, there was very little punishment. There was
same here.
Oh, yeah. Is it the same? Yeah, my mother would just have to come and pick me up, beat me. I got so used to the beatings, they didn't even count anymore. I just got harder. Right. And he would put me through windows to do burglaries, and he'd wait outside. He has no skin in the game. And I remember one time I went in the house and him and two of the other older guys were waiting because we would pawn immediately anything we got. He would. And they put me through the window. I go and I come running back. I go, they're here. There's people in the house. And he goes, what are they doing? I said, they're having sex. And he goes, they won't even pay attention. Don't worry. Go in. And so I'm bringing the stuff and giving him to out of the window. And he was right. They didn't even pay attention. They were into what they were doing. And when I came out, he literally used to search me. He used to make a joke. Hey, I got to turn you upside down and shake your pockets because he didn't want me to keep anything, no extra gold. And they would immediately go and buy beer and drink and hang out on the street corner and flirt with women and whistle. And the climax for young men in the hood was getting in a fight. It's kind of like hooligans. These guys, they just want to fight. They really don't care about the rest of it.
And when you were doing these burglaries with this guy putting you up to it, would it be like when you go in there, Scott, just get the gold or just get the watch or just get the cash? Or was there like a shopping list or was it just get anything of value?
Anything of value. And we didn't know. I didn't know yet. Obviously, I learned in life because it wasn't my first. And we didn't know about artwork or antiques. It was anything that you could pawn fast. So that's what stupid people steal. Electronics, anything that could be pawned. And we had a guy in our neighborhood, Dirty Wally.
Dirty Wally.
Dirty Wally would buy anything. I could bring him a fucking alarm clock. And he'd go, okay, $5. And he'd give you $5. He bought everything. So instant cash. And when you're young, I wasn't thinking about a home, an investment, a future. Cash in your pocket, a few laughs and some fun. And I tell people all the time, I know it's stupid. I know it was stupid. It was the most adrenaline you could ever imagine. I did my first burglary at about 6. But again, an older guy made me do it. The maid was sleeping. And I came out and I said, David, there's someone sleeping on the couch. He said, that's Liza. Don't worry, she won't wake up. And true to it. And I learned at an early age, I was a prolific burglar. I started using pillowcases from the age of 6 because they're easily accessible. You don't have to look through closets for luggage. You can run around the house throwing stuff in them. They're easy to grab and off you go. And I'd slide the stuff out of the window. My second burglary, while I was doing it, I was 7, the people came home. And like a professional, I had no choice. I stood behind the door and the door opened. They walked past me and kept going. And I went out the door and ran and that was it. We weren't getting stuff of value and we weren't in wealthy areas. So we were stealing from people who didn't deserve it. That later bothered my conscience. And I once said, I'm not going to steal from people anymore. From now on, it's going to be businesses because they have insurance.
So you progress from obviously doing the sort of house burglaries into then looking at robbing businesses.
Well, what happened is I actually thought about it when my mother moved to the suburb. I acclimated slowly. I went to the city again for 2 years, and I would see some of the guys in the suburbs, and we had a little conflict because I looked like a Viking. And that was England. I was hitting the shore. I just looked like a city kid. And so there was some conflict. And luckily for me, I met the Crow brothers. The Crow brothers were this big Irish family of tough boys. Blonde hair, blue eye. They look like choir boys, but boy, could they fight. They love to fight and get in trouble. I luckily met them and we became like brothers. We're still friends to this day. So this is a shout out to Chris and John. And Chris is still out there fighting. He actually sent me a video the other day of him fighting on the street. He's 62 years old and he knocked out like 5 guys. And I met them. And again, that hand of God or the angel was on my shoulder. They were my route to a better life, but I couldn't have blended with the good boys. So they were that route, and then they wanted the city. So back and forth to the city we went, and slowly, I was in the bad kid schools, by the way. So that school that they made me go to, it was for the rejects. This was
I mean, obviously we have schools like that in England, but was the school that you went to in Chicago? It was in
Chicago, yes.
Chicago. Was it basically like a breeding ground for criminals? Because all the kids were like badly behaved, and they was all sort of leaning.
Very, very accurate, Terry. And one of my friends used to call it's gladiator school. You're not really learning. You're surviving, and then you're meeting kids from other neighborhoods and older guys with new ideas, kind of what prison is. There's no reform in prison. Some people clean up and go straight because of them, because they say, you know what, I'm tired of it, or they outgrow it, or they run out of steam. But Bad Boy School was an experience. I was in 3 of them. So in Chicago, my first one was Mercy Mission, and then I was taken away from my mother and I was put in an orphanage. So I lived in an orphanage, and then I went to Oak Therapeutic School. I went to Montefiore. I went to all of them, and I got kicked out of all of them until I decided I don't want to be a dummy. Where am I going? I would look at people, and luckily I could see the truth. So I could see the difference in class and upbringing. It's a big difference. And there's a real life out there. There's a tangible, and there's a good, nice, honest way to live. And standing on a street corner, you're not going to go very far. And I always say, when you see a 35-year-old guy riding a kid's bike, you know he f***ed up his life.
That's good. I like that one.
And I saw many of those, and I said, if there was a time I wanted to be those guys, because when I was 12, I hooked up with this guy from Chicago by the name of Whacker, another Irish guy, and it's not Whacker for whacking people. It was Whacker for Patty Whacker, and his mother gave him that. All the family had nicknames. There was Whacker, Giggs, Gooch, and Cheeseburger, and they were all 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", skinny, and trouble. And I met him at 12. I was 12. He was 18, and I got a doctorate degree in 4 months with him. Doctorate of the streets. This guy, he spent 37 years of his 57 years of his life in prison. He was a shot caller in prison. He was the real deal. And he was one of my first mentors. He actually took me by the arm and said, I'm going to lead you through hell, and you probably won't survive. And somehow I did.
You should turn back to him and go, thanks, mate.
He passed away a few years ago. He had just gotten out of federal prison, 17 years they have a law in the U.S., felon with a firearm. You know what he said to me the first day he got out? He said, you got to get me a gun. And I said, mate, you just got out of prison. He said, I need one. I said, you don't need one. All your enemies are in wheelchairs or on walkers. He said, I bet you got one.
You say no comment.
Yeah, that's it. No comment.
But the you know, when you was growing up, because obviously here we have a problem with knives, right? So there is gun crime here, but it's mainly knives, because obviously
we had a lot of knife crime too. Bats, sticks. People, kids on the street, and this is unfortunate. Most of them don't have a father at home. So that's the first problem. No father at home. And when you have older guys like Whacker teaching you the way, it's not really the right route you should be going. When I was sitting in prison, I remember thinking, and I started thinking, every man should have to go to do a year in prison. That was my first thought, because you learn a lot. And then I said, probably the military. We should probably, if the boy doesn't have father at home and he gets in trouble, they should send him away until he's a certain age. Jordan Peterson says that the most vulnerable and dangerous time for a young man is like 14 to 27. And I can attest to that. I didn't really grow up, I think, until I was about 30, 32. When you start looking at the world different, boys need structure and they need supervision. When you leave them to their own devices, it's trouble.
And with the street stuff, obviously, like you said, you was doing the burglaries, you was doing robbing the businesses. What is the sort of worst violence you saw, sort of being in those gangs and moving around on the street? I saw
a lot of violence. For Whacker went to prison before the age of 18, because in Chicago, it's 17, you're an adult. He went to prison at 17 for stabbing somebody in the chest, and at 18 for stabbing somebody in the chest. So knives were very prevalent. And the most violent I saw, we were having a rumble, what they were called that time. Our gang, there were about 25 of us. We were walking to another neighborhood, to the Howard Street Jungle, it was called. And we were on our way there, 25 of us. We must have looked like a scene from a 1920s movie. And I was with an older guy, Freddie Coleman, and he had my cane. I had a sword cane. My mother bought it for me for Christmas. She, poor lady, didn't know what her son is asking for Christmas. It had a 20-inch sword inside of the cane. And Freddie had it, and we ran this guy down, and we caught him in a hallway, and he fell in between the stairs, and Freddie stabbed him about 8 times in the chest. And this came out in the newspaper and on the news, and Freddie pled guilty to some bullshit lower charge, and he got a 3-year sentence. And I was right there next to him when it happened, and I didn't like it. I would always ask myself, my mother didn't raise me to be like this. My family... I remember I was speaking to one of my cousins a few years ago, and she looked at me and she said, "Scotty, well, you wasn't a Ridgie. The Ridgies were kind of good. Were good people. They were decent. My grandmother, my grandfather, my mother, my aunts, my uncles. And what the fuck happened to you?" No father. And I was an outsider. The family, these ethnic units that are close, they don't really accept the outsider. I was light-skinned, light-eyed, light hair, and they were all dark Italians, and I was the outsider, and they just couldn't understand how I didn't behave well. Their generation, kids did what they were supposed to. Maybe it was my DNA, maybe it was who I was supposed to be. I sometimes think, that's who I was supposed to be. I bucked the system, but I did the same in business, and I became a legitimate businessman, and I created a small empire. At one time, I was the master franchise for Gold's GM in all of Mexico. I opened 5 gyms of my own, eventually 6, and I franchised 34 other gyms, and I sold them. I created this big, massive fitness equipment company. I sell every kind of equipment to this day. I still sell it. I have my own brand, manufacture overseas. We have boxing gear and fitness, cardio, weightlifting, everything. So maybe if I would have followed that mold, I would have been like my cousins that were stuck in a cubicle. And I couldn't, I would rather have been who I was than be punching a keyboard in a cubicle for 50 years until I got retired with a $14 watch as a gift.
I mean, the interesting thing is, I think sometimes when people are brought up on the street, they go through that that world and they learn the lessons, and they either carry on down that road, or they end up in jail, or they end up dead, or they end up taking those lessons and then going on to business.
Very rare.
Yeah.
In my case, there's more people dead and in prison than successful. There's only 2 people I know out of my neighborhood, myself and another friend, that actually moved on and thrived. And then there's a handful of people that moved on, auto mechanics, laborers, carpenters, and they're doing okay. A few guys, I talked to a friend, Sean Ronan, hadn't talked to him since childhood, talked to him the other day, and he's a successful contractor. He does very well. But he didn't straighten out until he got out of prison at 40. And so you learn a lot in the streets. You learn there's a whole nother code, and there's a code of honor, and there's a survival instinct. I have a sixth sense that I earned. But when we were in the suburbs, so I kind of cut it off from the gangs semi-permanently at 16. And when I fancy myself and I think in the past, I was a good kid. I started wrestling, I was boxing, I was always into martial arts because I love to fight. And I think about it, I go, wait a minute, I might do a burglary after a wrestling meet. My next book, I have my next book. The edit is almost finished, and that one will be out in about June. That's my life from 0 to 17 and a half-ish. And by the time I was 18, I already had 4 felonies. And I thought I was clean. I thought I had gone clean. We were robbing prostitutes, and I started robbing warehouses and going, first it was the low-hanging fruit, then I started going for the fruit that was a little higher. So I had those few years where I actually one of my uncles, Joe Mandarino, he was a Chicago cop, and he looked at me, he goes, who would have thought? He goes, you look like Joe College. Who would have thought you? And that was my intent. Took my tattoo off at 14, got clean cut, learned how to speak, educated myself, because the cops used to line us up. They would put us on our knees to humiliate and control us because you can't run. You know, put your hands in between, behind the head, and they check for tattoos and they take pictures. So they'd show up at a corner in Chicago, all you losers on your knees, everybody take your shirts off, put your hands behind your head, and they'd start taking pictures of us and the tattoos, because there was a gang crimes unit, and they had it was a museum of the gangs. But at that time, if I'm not mistaken, in my time, there were 110 street gangs throughout Chicago. So we were the soldiers of the night. If you ever saw the movie The Warriors, very similar to our existence. And there's a great movie out there. It's a documentary for anybody who's interested in this gang culture. It is called The Rubble Kings, not Rumble, Rubble, the buildings falling down, and it's based in New York. Great documentary, great story. And that's how we live. But it is a stupid, senseless, violent existence, because in my time, Arab, our leader, was killed. Tuffy, our next leader, was killed. Bimbo, who was Tuffy's brother, was killed after them. Think about their mother. Think about the mothers of these kids. And we would go to a funeral wearing our sweaters with our colors, pouring, we were young men at 12, pouring alcohol on the grave. And we had a poem for our gang. And we would recite our poem. We'd get drunk. We'd smoke. And we'd hope that there would be a conflict. Maybe the gang that killed him would come by and they'd shoot at us and we'd shoot at them. Everyone would have a gun. It was ignorance is what it was. High energy, no supervision, ignorance, and no father at home. It all accumulated to crap.
So those three gang leaders that were murdered, was it like they got basically blown away with guns?
They were all shot, yeah. And Arab was 17 or 18. He had just come back from the Vietnam War. Tuffy was a football phenom. He played on a league that I played. I knew him since I was a kid, and I looked up to him. He was 16. And then his brother stepped in. He lasted a year, and he was killed. And the family finally went away from Chicago and went to Kentucky. I think there was a brother and a sister left. But I was immersed in it, and I loved it. It was romantic. It was exhilarating. And then I went to the suburbs, and I felt ashamed and embarrassed. But what did I bring with me? I brought the street. I brought ignorance. And my poor little fat Italian mother that made $2.75 an hour, she didn't know what I was doing, and I gave her mixed signals. I looked like Joe College. And you know what? My last year of high school, maybe the last two, I was on the honor roll. I still have the little form that I was on the honor roll. It was an accomplishment for me. But here goes the big one. My last year in high school, I was scheduled to graduate in 1982. I would have been 18 years old, and I was wrestling. I had an offer from Northwestern University to trial for the wrestling team for a scholarship. I was a pretty good wrestler, and I was insecure. I said, I don't blend and mesh with these people. I really felt like I couldn't be there. I couldn't handle it. I couldn't hack it. I was down on myself, but I was going to school, and then one day, a friend of mine and I had two birds with us, two really attractive young women. We went, my friend knew the streets. We grew up together, and we went to a drug dealer's house to buy some pills. Back then, they were Quaaludes. They made you feel like an idiot.
That was it. The Wolf of Wall Street always made me laugh when he took them.
There you go. There were lemons and roars.
Which ones were the ones?
They were the same thing. They were prescription at that time. They weren't street stuff, and they were very coveted because they did wonders with girls.
Right.
And they removed all inhibition, and you just felt like you were Jell-O. And we went to get those with these two girls, and I just looked around, and this guy lived in this beautiful home. And he was supposedly connected because he was doing it out in the open. And when we went into his home, I smelled food cooking. I said, "Oh, broccoli." And he looked at me and he said, "You're the chef." My friend was actually the one who worked at the restaurant. And I said, yeah. I was very vague throughout my life because I knew that bad things could always come back to find you. So I knew how to be anonymous. And about a week or two later, I saw two of my younger proteges. And I told them what I saw. And they looked at me and said, let's get them. I said, I'm an adult. I'm on probation because I already had 2 felonies. And I don't know if I want to do this. And they're like, come on. And they instigate and they push me and they push the buttons, the coward buttons. Don't be a pussy. Come on, what's fucking wrong with you? And these
the old Scott would have done that.
13 and 15. 13 and 15, the other 2 guys. 13 and 15. And I was obviously older and more seasoned, and the street guy, they were both not as seasoned as me. And so they bothered me to the point I hadn't been going to school for like 2 or 3 days because I had a terrible cold. And they thought I was hiding, but I was down and out. Finally, I said, what the f do you guys want? I opened the door. They're like, come on, are we going to do it? I said, okay. And I had a girlfriend. I didn't have a gun because I was behaving myself. So I had a girlfriend whose father was an attorney. And we were in the same school and classes and stuff. And I asked her in class, I said, hey, does your dad have a gun? She's like, yeah. I said, I need it. So she brought it to me. Didn't have bullets. She didn't have any bullets. And I had, it was a .357 or a .38. They're the same one, big revolver, very good and intimidating. But I only had 9mm bullets and they went through the chamber clicking. So I filled the back of the chamber with like toilet paper so they wouldn't click. And I looked at it and I go, yeah, that works. And we hunted this guy down. We surveilled him for maybe a month and hunted him down, and it almost didn't go through. And then one day we rang the doorbell. It was a beautiful building. We rang the doorbell and he answered and buzzed us in. We all looked at each other like, holy shit, it's game time. And we went up into his apartment and he was so excited to see us and he remembered me. I was an attractive boy, so he probably had a crush on me, and come on in. And the other kids were cute, clean cut little kids. What can I do for you, Terry? I only had $8 in my pocket. That's it. You don't buy very much drugs, but we weren't there. We weren't there to buy them. We were there to take them. And anyway, he said, I told him I only have $8, and he said, I could see the disappointment, but because we were young and pretty, I think he was gay. And that was my opinion. And he said, okay, I'll give you some hash. I have some beautiful Afghan hash. He said, I have cocaine, I have heroin, I have FDA, I have fluids, I blah, 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 blah. And I was kind of against drugs. I wasn't using drugs anymore. I was clean. I thought there was a stigma with it. So that kind of gave me, I became righteous at that moment. F him. This is why I can do it, because he's doing something bad. And a week before that, I talked to Wacker, who was again in prison, and he told me, you're the lead on this, bro. You take him in the bedroom, you put the pillow over his head, and you shoot him. The pillow's going to start on fire, but you put it out, and the pillow will muffle the sound, and it'll be quiet. And I said, no, man, I'm going to go steal his stuff. He said, he sees your face. We're talking 70s and 80s in America. You didn't want somebody to see your face during a crime because they can come and kill you. And I said, no, I'm not doing that. And anyway, I did it. I pulled out the gun. And when I used to do these, we called them burns because when the old days, when we took someone's gang colors, we burned their sweater. And sometimes we literally burned it. That was kind of the trophy. And you would burn it and take pictures of an opponent's sweater being burned. They should do that in boxing, take his robe and burn it in the ring. And I pulled the gun out and I just got into a zone because I was already a serious, hardened criminal, and threw him on the floor and we tied him up. And to our surprise, boy, oh boy, it was jackpot. The box that he had the marijuana in, it was a Marlboro box in Spanish because the weed was coming from Colombia back then. It was high quality Colombian gold, and it was half the size of this screen, and it was this thick. It was 40 or 50 pounds, so about 20 kilos of prime marijuana, an entire, just a massive amount of cocaine and pills and money and a gun. And I couldn't believe it. While I'm loading this stuff in pillowcases, I had to switch my MO because it wouldn't fit in the pillowcases. He had these big garbage bags, so I used big garbage bags. The adrenaline is flying high. I was smart enough to know in case of he calls the police, because a lot of people will call the police to get a clue in on you. Just say, I don't know why. They came in my house, they robbed me, and let the police do the work instead of the streets, or both at the same time. I grabbed handfuls of and I threw them all over the apartment and down the stairs, the front stairs. I said, if he's going to call the police, he's got to clean. So we got a space. We ran down the back stairs and we're on a very busy thoroughway. This was a busy, fast-moving road, but it was rush hour and it was stopped. And I got a gun in my hand and we're carrying satchels and we're running. And it was a scene out of a movie. And we ran a block away. We had our car. My car was parked in an underground parking garage of an abandoned building, a lot of abandoned buildings in Chicago at that time. And the flashlight went off and I said, oh my God, they caught us. But it was some guy walking his dog, got in the car, rushed home. When we saw everything, we didn't know what to do. What do you do with all this stuff? I didn't have the contacts. When I was in the streets, someone recently asked me this, and you were in a gang, weren't you guys selling drugs? Not really. The drugs didn't happen until a little bit later. I sold joints in front of the school, but there was no way I was going to sell this stuff. So I did what every crafty criminal should do. I put it away and I sat on it. And I told the guys that were with me, we're not going to get caught because of flash. We're going to put it away. We're going to hide it. And I sat back and I waited because I wanted retail. I didn't want it. I went to a few people. So I went back to the old neighborhood and talked to a few of the older guys that were into stuff like that. And I noticed right away that they were offering the sucker price. Hey, I'll give you five. I'll give you, 2 pennies, 2 cents on the dollar. And I said, I'm going to sit on it. I'm going to wait. And I kept going to school. And one day I was walking through the hall at school and I could see the office was filled with police. They were looking for me. The guy had found out what high school I went to. And lo and behold, they searched every yearbook. I never took a yearbook photo. You couldn't find one of me if you wanted. And that too was by design. And again, it was that hand on my shoulder because he needed to find out who I was so the people that were with him and backing him and connecting could get their hands on me. And then he started offering a reward. And my friend who went there with me, who initially introduced me to him, they got to him. And they picked him up. And luckily he had a mob, an Italian mafia hookup because this older woman that he was romancing worked for the mob, which through her, I later did some work for them. She went to the meeting and she made some phone calls and said, wait a minute, he's not alone. And that's a big thing in the streets. Who are you with? Who's got your back? And who's going to step up for you or with you? So they had a powwow. And according to my friend, I wasn't there, but him and I are still friends to this day. They said, we want the guy with the evil in his eyes. That's who we want. The other guys, they were just young kids, but we want him. And that's it. You give us him and nothing will happen. He said he denied it, but he called me up and he said, you must return everything. I laughed. I said, there is not a fucking chance that I'm returning anything. It's not happening. He said, they find out who you are. They'll come for you. I said, if you want, tell them where I am. Let's get it over with. They can come for me. And I wasn't bluffing. The next day, I was like my mother's leader. She was lost. She was in over her head. I brought her to get her a gun card. You had to have an FOIA card, a federal card to buy a weapon. We got the card and I bought a pump shotgun. And I slept under the dining room table, not really under, but almost under on the far side because our front door was here, our back door was here. And I thought, if they come while I'm sleeping, they're never going to think somebody's sitting on the floor. Yeah. And I've had a lot of training with weapons. Yeah, and I slept with it next to me. And Terry, the most bizarre thing, I swear to everybody, my mother never questioned me. She never asked me like, what the f*** are you doing sleeping with a shotgun under the dining room table? Every day, I would wake up in the morning for school, roll up my stuff, put it back in the bedroom and where it went. And she never even really figured it out. And I would go to school, and I graduated high school. And while I was going through this, I started dealing. I started selling it here and there, and the taste of money for a poor young nobody, because we had nothing. My mother got her first car at 52 when I sent her to driving school and bought her first car. So we had nothing. That meant everything to me. And that began a career in robbing drug dealers. I robbed 32 of them. And
I love that.
And
what was your biggest stash? Was it the first one, the biggest hit?
No, because it got deeper and more advanced. Because what happened is I did the first one, and then I did two more following that within a couple months of each other. And they were minor. They were $10,000, $20,000 and split between two or three guys. It goes fast. And when you don't know about money and you don't understand money, you really spend it foolishly. So I started doing that, and then I needed to replenish my stock because I now had a clientele, and I got along with people and teachers from my school. I sold to teachers from my school. I sold to their friends, business people. And
what was their drug of choice? Was it
cocaine? and cocaine didn't have the stigma back then. It wasn't. They weren't freebasing, smoking crack. That didn't exist yet. It was snorting powder cocaine, and the movie stars did it. And here's one for you. I sold to the crew from Scarface.
I love that.
I did it with him and sold it with him.
Is Al Pacino bang on it?
No comment. And Al Pacino spent a month with Manny, Stephen Bauer, at his house in Malibu on the beach, learning the Cuban accent because Stephen Bauer is really Cuban. Stephen Bauer and I were good friends back then. Shout out to Stephen. I hope you're doing well. I'm going to find you soon.
Is that Manolo?
That's Manolo.
Manolo.
And I'll send you some of the pictures I have with Steve. Great guy. Just really just an actor and a guy, not a criminal. So I created this clientele, and it's as close as a street guy can get to celebrity. Is when you're in the mix. I got into all the nightclubs. I knew all the doormen, and not only that, I was a street guy and I was a fighter. I boxed. I did kickboxing. I was a competitive wrestler too. I had some street rep and a reputation, and it's like being a celebrity. It just felt fucking awesome. You're a nobody, poor kid. You got nothing coming. You've got no voice, no vote. I remember getting beat by the cops so many times. We didn't even make a complaint. It was lunch. That was it. And here's a great one for you. One of my last drug burns before I matured and grew up, he became a Chicago cop. So I robbed him before he became a cop, and he just had it in for me. He would tell anybody who he could find, anybody he could see, now I hunt bad guys, and I'm looking for one. And it worried me because he finally became citywide narcotics, right, which meant that he had power. And if he caught me, he could plant, he could say, he could do anything. I even thought about going and filing a complaint with Internal Affairs because of what could potentially happen. And I went to see another friend of mine who was a cop, and he said, "No, Scott, that's not the way we handle stuff. Let's go to his house," which means his station. "I go with you. That way nobody will do anything to you, and we'll talk to him." And we never did that because I didn't want to involve my friend. I was always conscientious. My friend, my cop friend, was kind of like a Boy Scout.
Right.
I didn't want to dirty him with my bullshit, so I said, I'll deal with it. If I ever have to cross that, and I never crossed him. We never crossed paths because I ran away to Mexico. Right. He was part of the reason.
So you got chased out of town by the drug dealer that you robbed. He decided to go. I mean,
it was a lot deeper.
You must have inspired him though to think, actually, I'm going to get this.
I was very brave. One of my friends said, and I want to get him on video because I need to back some of this up because people are calling me out as this sounds like Fantasy Island. and it's not. It's all true and then some. And I had this thing in my head. I thought if I would ask myself, I was extremely loyal to a fault. And I would always say or ask myself, will this person be my friend after this dirty business is over? And if the answer was no, then they were fair game. But I never crossed any of the guys. I have 45 guys that I grew up with, and we still talk and say hello to this day, and I never crossed them. The contrary, I helped people, I loaned money, I bought people cars, I did a lot of good things. I kind of fancied myself as a version of Robin Hood. Right. Kind of helped me sleep better at night. And so the people that I did do, they weren't the people, they weren't my cup of tea to begin with. So that bullshit about honor among thieves, there is none. As soon as a guy gets arrested, people are picking up his stuff, grabbing his girlfriend. It's a cruel world out there. And you know, when you moved to Mexico, I mean, that's kind of like an odd choice of no, Terry. That wasn't a choice. So here goes the Mexico story. You know, I want to mostly talk about the cigar smuggling because you and I are probably going to do 10 episodes together because there's so much. And
this is just to wet the beaks.
This is just to wet the beaks. So what happened is I had become a pretty predominant high-level drug dealer in Chicago. I was known, and I would
Did you have a nickname?
I didn't have it. I had a nickname as a kid, and I don't want to say it until the book comes out because it's embarrassing. I'll tell it to you when we're off. Anyway, I started going from Chicago to Miami. It was the drug pipeline because the Colombians were bringing the cocaine and their into Miami. And that was, I was entrepreneurial. So let's pretend when I started, a kilo of cocaine was $80,000 in Chicago. But you might get that same one for $60 in Miami. So I was running back and forth to Miami, and on one of those return trips, and the irony is I was warned, I was told, and I didn't pay attention. I was like, no way. I had a secret luggage with a hidden compartment. I felt very secure that I was okay, and my clean cut, I would wear my boxing uniform and had the boxing team, clean cut. And it always worked. I could always tell the cops, come on, I'm an athlete. I don't drink. I don't smoke. And this time it didn't work with that old Southern Georgia state trooper. And my right-hand man, David Bonomo, was asleep in the back of the car. And they searched my car 4, 5, 6 times. They just kept going over and over. Then they one of them decided, let's empty all of this luggage. They might have had a report. They might have known. They might have had a lot of experience because coppers get a lot of experience. They get trained. So they know what to look for. Out-of-state plates, 2 guys alone. I made a big mistake. I was driving at night. I just wanted to get home. It was a 24-hour straight drive if you didn't stop. I was in a hurry. I had 2 girlfriends at home. And they found it.
That was an incentive.
That was always an incentive. And they found it. Bang. I immediately, I have good reactions. I was gone. And they were shooting at me. And funny thing is, you know, I could hear the bullets. You could hear them. And I thought I got shot because I hit this. I was trying to muscle my way through this. It was a dip. So you have a dip in the road and then you're coming up and it looked like brush. And I hit it like a linebacker and I bounced back. And that's when I thought they hit me. Lost my wind. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, but it was a fence. So I got back up. I leaped over it. Fence had these metal spikes through it. And long story short, I got away and I had to go to Mexico. And I went to Mexico and I built a life and I met deeper people, heavier people. I now call myself a street guy in remission because you never completely lose it. Have you ever seen that movie with Robert De Niro when he's in the witness protection program and they send him to France? And he starts having these flashbacks of slamming people's head. And that happens to me happens to me often. But I've grown out of that. I have 8 children. And I've been a legitimate person for a very, very long time. And so I went to Mexico. While I was in Mexico, I was there for about 4 months, and people weren't responding the same as when I was standing in front of them. I had a lot of money on the streets, a lot of money. For argument's sake, let's say $300,000. So $300,000 in 1987 in the U.S., it was 3 homes, because I bought my first home at 19 years old for $48,000. A home cost about $100,000. A nice home cost about $100,000 because I was shopping for them for my mother. That's a lot of street guys' dream. That's like the pinnacle of arriving. I'm going to buy mama a home. And that I had that on my mind, but I first bought myself a home for $48,000. I only lived there for a short period. I remodeled the entire thing myself. I pretty handy with construction. I've always worked labor and menial jobs as a young man, so remodeled the whole thing. But then the crime got deeper and deeper once the police found out where I lived, because there was an armored car robbery that I was a suspect in, and there were 3 guys that robbed it. 2 of them were sitting in jail, and one of the guys that got arrested, there's a famous shootout in Chicago. It was the Carson's Rib shootout, and I was involved in that, but I didn't do it. I backed out at the last minute because one of the guys that was involved was just way too intense for me. His attitude for everything was life and death, and I wasn't that radical. I like to make decisions with my mind and not my emotions. So backed out of that, and they all got shot and went to jail. And then the rumor or the news about the armored car, because the police had no information about that armored car at all. And one of the people, he wasn't involved in the armored car, but he informed them that I was. Now, I was picked up for that. So that was a life-altering moment, because I got one of the best beatings that I was ever given in my life for 3 days. I was transferred from station to station to station. And the police have these wonderful methods of beating you without leaving any marks. So one of them is a telephone book. You remember they used to be this thick. They'll beat you with it. And they would put it on the chest, and someone would hold it, and then they would punch you full force. And they would put it on your head. And with their billy club, those come from here, I believe, either here or Ireland, that name billy club, they would hit you. So it's a thud, but they're not breaking the skin or the bone open. It's just bang. And 3 days of that. And fortunately, I was very seasoned by then. Right. They didn't get anything out of me, but they became my nemesis. They wanted me. There was, I heard that there was $382,000 and 6 revolvers that were taken out of that armored car, couple envelopes with some bearer bonds and stocks. That's what I was told. And they wanted, when the cops, cops don't make a lot of money.
Right.
They're hardworking men that don't make a lot of money. And when somebody slips through their fingers, they don't take it very well. But luckily, I avoided violence. I had a friend that said, no powders, no pistols, no pills, no police. So you want to be a criminal, you stay away from those things, and the police will probably stay away from you. So when there's violence involved, they want you off the street. You're a target. So I knew that and avoided that. But that put a lot of heat on me. I had to move away from where I lived, and I became a ghost. I didn't let nobody knew where I lived except for each girlfriend knew a different place where I lived. And because I didn't want to, I had already gone through all that. I wanted to be able to lay my head down where I slept in peace. And when you're robbing drug dealers, you're selling drugs and the police are after you, you're going to get a surprise visit sooner than later. So I was really moving around, and it helped me last for another 3 years. So after the armored car, I had enough time to bury myself deeper and deeper, as deep as I could get, until 1987, January 18th, 1987, when I was pulled over. And I'll send you that newspaper clipping too. And That was the end of it. That was the end of my life as I knew it. No more celebrity status. No more Mr. Big Shot. No more showing off. That was it. And it was a realization that I came to like a bucket of ice being poured on my head. Where do I go now? And what do I do? And I knew that I became currency. When you're a fugitive, you become currency. And it didn't last very long. 3 weeks after my Georgia incident, I told one of my childhood friends, and out of the anger and the disdain I have for him, I'll never repeat his fucking name ever again. I call him Trusty. Everyone started calling him Trusty even before that because he couldn't be trusted. I went to him. This is a guy I went to kindergarten with. His mother fed me. My mother fed him. We slept at each other's homes. And I told him the story. And he laughed at me because he knew there would be a vacuum and there would be a space available for somebody to move up a couple levels. And he owed me a lot of money. And he said, I got a big deal going on tomorrow. I'll pay you tomorrow. And I also will probably need some product. Do you have any? And I had product. I needed cash because I needed to liquidate and make a decision. And he tried to set me up. The following day, he got arrested. And I'm watching the news at my girlfriend's parents' house.
Right.
Her mother's boyfriend is on the couch. We're talking business and big shot stuff. He was he was involved with the Colombians, and we're talking about this stuff. And I'm looking, my beeper. We had beepers, not cell phones. Do you remember the beepers?
Pages. We call them pager. Yeah, but you're beepers.
And I'm watching. They were beepers and pagers. I was watching the news. I'm getting paged by this guy who is handcuffed and being walked through the police station, and they show the whole arrest scene and everything. And I finally figured out, and I turned to the South American and said, I need to leave the city. That was it. He took me to Mexico, and the betrayal is unbelievable. When you're weak, everybody takes advantage. That's why a lot of street guys are very hard and stay strong, because the only thing that keeps you alive really in the street is if people fear you and the threat of violence. And so I ran away to Mexico, and I was there for only 4 months because I had to come home and start collecting. At a very, very hard time collecting, because when you're busted or you're in prison, people kind of think you're dead. It's as if you were dead. And I was told by a friend I met in Mexico. We became lifelong friends, and he said, you've got to go home because it's the only way to collect. He saw me suffering, trying to call people the roundabout way. I had a few confidants I trusted, and I had to be very careful. And people weren't responding. I went home. I got home, and the truth is, I was blown away by the betrayal. And even with my girlfriends, my good friends, my mates, they were already working that direction and after them, and it was eye-opening, and I looked at life different. But I did have a couple guys that I could take to the grave with me. One of them was Wacker, who was in prison as usual. There was Brett Stewart, and unfortunately, David Bonomo was sitting in Georgia in my place. So he was incarcerated in Georgia because he was caught with me, and had these other guys, and they helped me as much as they could, but they were rolling. They had stepped into my spot. They were rolling. They threw me some money, and they helped me out, and I stayed with them. And then I had a come to Jesus moment, because the fake I stayed back in Chicago, and have you had anybody on here who was a fugitive?
No.
Being a fugitive, it transforms you. You're like a caged animal, because you have to worry any moment. You can be just swept off, and anything you're building or you have pending disappears. So you can't build a life. I can't use your real name. I had 3 different aliases, but the one I was using was a kid who was mentally challenged. I worked out a method to get all of his papers without him knowing. I got a driver's license, and I had everything to live. But I started doing even worse stuff. Now I had a reason and a vengeance, and it was kind of like, F you, you're selling fucking drugs. I can't anymore. You're making big money, and I want a piece of it. And Pablo Escobar did that too. He became just an extortioner. He became someone that strong-armed people. So I started doing a little bit of that, and I had a goal. I said, I got to get enough money so I can live. I can live out the rest of my life as a fugitive. And that creates a whirlpool of problems. And then that friend that I had met in Mexico, he calmed me down. He was very wise, and he would say, "Slow down, my son." He called me my son. He was older than me. He was probably 15 years older than me. And he'd say, "Breathe, calm down." And he taught me. He removed greed, because he was very generous, and they were involved. It was this whole Colombian-Mexican drug dealing organization with international contacts, and I got involved with them, through him, and they all trusted me. So they did not know what I did before. None of them knew that I robbed drug dealers, and several of them had spoken bad about me after that, and I want to say, F you. I respected you. I treated you like a man, and you now disrespect me. I could have taken you. These guys were moving 100, 200, 500 kilos at a time. I one time for them drove $5 million from Chicago all the way down to Miami. I was paid for it, but on my watch, their money, nothing happened to it. I didn't set them up. I didn't do any surveillance and turn them on to anybody bad. I turned them on to a couple really big clients, and one of them was my uncle. I turned them on to him, and they said to me, because I have certain ethics, and I don't want to sit at a table and hear anything that isn't pertinent to me. So they started negotiating several times. This happened, and I would get up and walk away. They go, "What are you doing?" I said, "This is private." "Yeah, but you're with us." I said, I want to be the one, when something goes wrong, you guys say, who knew? And I want to be the one who didn't know. Why? Because the people who know can end up dead. So my uncle and these guys were negotiating. Then they called me and they said, "Scott, how much do you want?" And I said, "I want absolutely nothing. What I want is, when you guys get busted, you forget about my name." They both looked at me, said, "What do you mean when we get busted?" I said, "Let me be real clear. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. It happens to everybody. You cannot live life as a criminal for very long. You're going to slip up. There's some really good detectives out there, some really good investigators. And back then there were no cameras, but there's a lot of people talking, and 9 months later, my uncle got arrested. He was a career policeman, retired, had a restaurant, wanted to play around on the dark side. 9 months a drug dealer, and he got arrested, and he was sentenced to 28 years in prison. He did 14 years in prison. And my uncle was cellmates with a guy from my neighborhood, Joe Gansey, who was one of the most well-known street gang legends in Chicago. So they got to talk about me, and my uncle ran into a lot of people that knew me, but it's almost an honor. Joe Gansey ran and the founder of the TJOs, which was the largest white street gang in the history of Chicago, organized, vicious, and he went on to run and create the North Siders, which was a prison gang, street legend. So I have at least that honor of saying, I knew Joe, and I have a T-shirt. I have one of their original jerseys that nobody who wasn't a member has. I was not a member, but it was hand-given to me, and I honor it. I still have it. My uncle had to do 14 years in prison, and he owed me $20,000. I loaned him when he was down and out, never paid me. And so my karma's okay. And then I had to run off to Mexico again. He was part of the reason, because it created a lot of heat for me. Went down to Mexico and started a life. And I met a lot of heavy players in Mexico. I know them all. And the truth is, any of these cartel leaders, if you meet them and know them one-on-one, they're really decent men. As far as social interaction, business is another thing. If you owe anybody money, they're not happy about it. And these guys don't go to court. There is no court for that. They handle it a different way. And I built a life, and I tried my hardest to stay out of trouble. Just wasn't working out. But to my surprise, that hand of God or an angel on my shoulder again, the lawyer in Georgia had told me, I didn't only have that Georgia case. I had a counterfeiting case and gun running case in Chicago, but they weren't as prevalent. Georgia was hanging over me. My mate Dave was locked up in my stead, and I spoke to his lawyer, and his lawyer said, if I could speak to Scott, because I said, if you were hypothetically speaking to Scott, what would you say? He said, I would tell him he needs to stay out of the police, out of their hands for 5 years, and then this thing is fixable. I'll send you the newspaper article. 5 years and 1 day is when they got me. I swear on a Bible, it's like it was meant to be, and I was so tired of being a fugitive. It's draining. It is debilitating because you just never know. And my girlfriend got pregnant, and she was going to have a baby, and it was eating me alive. I was thinking, my baby birth certificate is going to have a fugitive name. I can't give her my name. They took me away. She was born on January 31st, so 2 weeks after I was apprehended. So she got to have my real name, and it was relieving. And while I was sitting in jail, I had a lot of time, as you can imagine. I always read a lot. That's one of my saving graces also. You guys, everybody needs to read. So was sitting there thinking about life, and I said, that's it. I'm done. No more crime. But I was on the phone talking to all my friends, and all my friends back home, they were rolling. It was now big time. And I had all these Mexican contacts in Colombia. And I actually could have put together a team that could have made millions. But I said no. I looked in the mirror. I looked at myself, and I said, that's enough. And the main reason was my attorney that I hired in Georgia, Thomas Garwood. Several of my books will probably be dedicated to him, and he's mentioned in this one and in all of them because he looked like an angel. He looked like the male version of my grandmother. And he said, Scott, I'm going to help you out because I think you're just a young man who likes adrenaline. I think that it was all about the adrenaline and you're just having fun. And because I was he didn't know the ruthless villain I had been since 5, but him trusting me and he went above and beyond his duty. And he got me out of almost everything. But he said, you got to sit tight. You got to let me do my magic. And I told him, I said, because the Colombians had sent me an attorney that they could monitor because they were worried that I'm going to probably snitch on them. And and their attorney had told me, the prosecutor hates you, Scott. You're going to the wall. And when I told this new lawyer, he laughed and he leaned back and he said, oh, Scott, now Biff, he don't hate you. We was talking about you the other day. We thought you was dead. You was up them in the woods. Tell me, Scott, did they hit you with any of them bullets? You know, that state trooper, John Hitchcock, he had lightning bolts all over his car for all the drug dealers up north that he caught. He said, did you hear the bullets whistling by? And I said, yeah. He said, shit, we thought you was dead. And I said, well, no. And then we laughed and joked. And he said, now, Biff don't hate you. You just let me get to working. You sit here, you be quiet, and you let me take care of it. And God bless him. He took care of it. And I made a promise to myself in his honor. I'm not going to fuck up anymore. I had disappointed everybody in my life up until that point, and I stuck with it. And I got out of jail, and I had to go back. I thought I was getting out of jail, but back into the federal system. And about a year later, I got out, and I'm back on the street on parole. And I have all of my friends are in that same business. And I remember somebody, a lawyer, a counselor, somebody tell me, well, Scott, when you get out, you just make new friends and start a new life. I wanted to fucking cry. I don't know another life. I went to kindergarten with these boys. We grew up we're all from the same place. We're brothers in arms. And it hurt me when he said that, but I knew I had to keep a distance and I had the discipline that I could do it. And I went back to the street and they were rolling, and I started businesses. I always had jobs. I always had a good work ethic, and I could grind, even in the drug business, even in the robbery business. I sometimes would stake out and do surveillance and research for 3-4 months to get it right. That's the next level. That's the next jobs. And then I went back to Mexico, and that's when the cigars landed in my lap. 2 boxes of Cuban cigars changed the trajectory of my life. I was schlepping boxing gear. I was managing fighters. I was promoting boxing, managing, training. I'm a really good boxing trainer. I had Mario Cevache Martinez, Jorge Baca. Jorge Baca beat Lloyd Huntington here. Marco Antonio Barrera, Julio Cesar Chavez, and both of his sons trained in my gym. I'm currently working as an advisor and a good friend. He's my godchild, Rafael El Divino Espinosa. He's a featherweight WBO champion. He might fight Nick Ball.
Right.
Nick, sign on the dotted line. I think Nick is avoiding him. Or maybe it's Frank Warren. So anyway, I'm doing this, but I don't like that boxing world. That is nastier. The boxing world is nastier than my street world. And you can't slam people's heads in the drawer. So went to Cuba on a trip, and out of pity, I bought 2 boxes of Cuban cigars. Almost abandoned them in Cuba, but my friend said, no, you're gonna, that's your money. I said, it's $50, $25 a box. Let the maid have it. He said, no, you paid for it, take it. Threw it in my bag, went home, threw it in a shelf, and gave it to my childhood friend, Brett. He was rolling. And the next time I saw him, he said to me, hey, you have any more cigars? And it was only like 2 weeks. And I said, you smoked them all already? He said, no, I sold them. I said, you sold the cigars? He said, yeah. I said, how much? He said, $25 a piece. Ching, ka-ching, that light bulb went off, and I said, calculated $625, a box of 25. You think if I could get those here, I could sell them? He said, of course. Everyone's smoking now. That was 1994. Everybody's smoking. There was a cigar craze. I was a man on a mission. I almost dropped what I had there and ran back to the airport. I got back to Mexico, and I was a man on a mission. I had to hunt down. How could I find them? Wasn't easy. It's a lot of road work. And back then there was no social media where I could post it and ask who knows. Started calling people. It took me a week, 10 days. And somebody said, hey, I know a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy. He sells Cuban cigars. I got a hold of him. He was a Cuban guy, Arturo Brigante. He showed up with his assistant, suitcases loaded with cigars, and kind of like the movie Blow, I said, I'll take it all. And he looked at me and he's like, what? I'm like, all. I need more. And it was more and more. And in about 3 weeks, I had gone through about 200 boxes of cigars of his. And he said, Scott, the fuck are you doing with all these cigars? I was taking them to Chicago, taking them to the border. But what people don't understand, this is not like a kindergarten picnic. Anybody out there been to Mexico? I want to see you. Here's a thing. I want to see you make it out of Cuba into Mexico, all the way through Mexico, just to the Mexican-U.S. border alive. If you can do that, then we'll talk. People think, oh, it's just easy. Yeah, and I tell people, this is my standard answer. I said, of course, I would take my private jet, land at the Havana airport. They'd roll out the red carpet. Fidel would greet me at the door, shake my hand, tell the guys to load my cigars into the jet, and I'd fly off into the sunset. It wasn't even close. There was a $1,000 limit that you could remove out of Cuba. That's 2 boxes of Cuban cigars. And you couldn't find them. There was a huge international demand. You could not find them. You had to be crafty. You had to meet people. You had to socialize. And you had to spread around the generosity. Then you get to the airport and you have these federal agents, the customs. They're worse than they are in Britain. These are straight, square people that are under surveillance, and being crooked could mean a firing squad. You're not bribing them easy. People think it's easy. You had to meet them through family and be very, very crafty and careful, and then get them into Mexico. And then what do you have? You have the Mexicans. They're waiting. What do you got for me? There's another part. And it could be in one airport in Mexico, it could be 3 levels of people you've got to take care of. Depending how fortunate, if you get to the top guy first, well, he kicks the other guys out of the way. But if the bottom guys get you, you got to go through everybody until you get to him, because they all want their share. And then you've got to move them from Mexico City to the border, which is approximately a 15-hour drive with 5 checkpoints.
You're in bandit country as well, aren't you?
Oh, the bandits. I have several stories about bandits. And then you get to the border, and now you've got the Yanks on the other side. They're just going to invite you in. Hey, bring your illicit products, and we'll just stamp it as clean and go on through. And by the way, you f***ing felon and criminal, we have a special lane for you. You get the red car. No, the red carpet. No. So I had to get the cartel guys, they're what would you call them? They're mules, to carry it across to the other side. But when you're on the other side of the American border, you are not it's not like being in the middle of New York City. You are in no man's land. From the Mexican border for about 22 miles, it is no man's land. You have drones and cars and cameras and jeeps and planes and helicopters and motorcycles and horseback. The agents are looking for somebody who's bringing illicit products. And at 22 miles, there is a second checkpoint. And after I got through all of those obstacles and hurdles, I went to Chicago, and now I got to find clientele. And I went to my friend, my late friend. He passed away several months ago. Howard From, the Rolex king of Chicago. He was the king of the used Rolexes. He knew everybody. It was so prevalent, his familiarity with everybody, that I had a saying that I invented. If you don't know Howard, you're not from Chicago. He was in the mix, in the center of Chicago, selling Rolexes. Everybody, gangsters, businessmen, sports, celebrities, everybody. Joey Pantaleone, the actor, Joey Pants, I sold cigars to him there. Ron Rivera from the Chicago Bears, I sold cigars to him there. Through Howard, indirectly, but through him, I met Chicago Bear legend Sean Gale, Chicago Bear legend Richard Dent, and lo and behold, Michael Jordan. I used to go to Michael Jordan's house.
Did you get him to get you a pair of them f***ing shoes?
You know what? Michael Jordan signed a jersey. I had a plan, but this is what happened. Richard Dent introduced me to Michael. And I like I said, I have ethics and I'm prudent. He said, Scott, please don't bother Michael for anything. Anything you want from Michael, you can get it through me. And I respected that. And I remember my friends would prepare these bags. You know Michael. And here's the real deal. I know Michael. Michael knows me. But I'm not Michael's mate. I am a service provider. And when I was doing the cigars, I was very humble. I didn't spend my money on clothes. And you know what was the worst? This was really hard. Coming from the flash in the old days that I came from and being around the professional athletes and multimillionaires. One of my customers was a billionaire, a legitimate billionaire. And they all dressed snappy and I dressed like a peasant. And it was painful. I remember one or two of the athletes that I was selling to, and they had like a 5-carat diamond stud. And I felt like a heel. That's what I felt like. I was like, I look like I'm just their service provider. And that's what I was, and I accepted it. I drove shit cars because if they're going to get confiscated, I'm not going to lose $50,000 on a stupid car. I'm going to lose $1,000. I had 3 or 4. I went through 3 or 4 of those cars in my period of cigar smuggling. I met a lot of amazing people. They took me in like family, and I'm proud to say none of them were ever robbed or kidnapped on my watch. I didn't turn them over to any of my cronies. I didn't plan it. Now, I did have a little bit of envy. I would look at them, and what I realized, Terry, because from where I came from and the life I had a lowest health self-esteem, and I didn't think so highly of myself because I knew what real life and education was. And I looked at these people and I realized they don't have very much on me. I could have done what all of them did if I would have given different circumstances in life. That helped me grow a lot. I looked at it and I'm not going to mention which guy because some of them were very sharp, but some of them I would look at them and I would say to myself, this fucking dummy is a millionaire. How? And so it was a doctorate in life for me. 4 years of living amongst them. Some of them adopted me like family, and all of them were good to me. And I probably had 100 plus customers. 98% of them were high-end professionals. I had a few car salesmen that weren't breaking any world records, but I had many men who owned car dealerships, the hottest nightclubs, the biggest cigar stores, lounges, the largest taxi, the yellow taxi company in Chicago. I sold to the owner. It was an amazing period of my life. And I swore to myself, no more crime. And in between that, I had offers. When I was crossing it in the border, one of the big, heavy cartel guys that knew me said, Scott, the f*** are you doing? He said, you tell me what city you want, and I'll give you a ton on credit. And I said, thank you, but no thank you. And believe me, temptation, as I started maturing, I realized I had two devils on one of my shoulders and one little angel on the other one. And this is what would happen. The devils would say, take it, take the ton, go for it, you can retire. And the angel would say, don't do it, don't listen to them, they're bad. And they'd say, f*** him, he's a fucking And then he'd say, don't listen to them, listen to the way they talk, listen to me, listen to your instinct. And these guys would be almost convincing me, and I'd go, okay, no, you're going to keep selling cigars and you're going to pay attention. Keep your eye on the goal. And the goal was my own big gym.
And with the cigars, obviously you started off small. And for anybody that's watching or listening to this podcast, the actual methods and all of the little things that went wrong and the things that went right.
Everything went wrong.
And all the things that, all the frogs that Scott had to kiss to actually get to where he ended up. Is all in the book in great detail. So
yes,
you're all going to have to click on the link below and buy the book to find out.
The book is awesome. And not only buy the book, please also
read
click. Thank you, Terry. Thank you. That almost slipped me. My publisher said, Scott, please ask the people to also click on and add the ebook. It's only 99 cents. So here, I don't know if it'll be £1 or less. Click on the ebook, support me, buy the paperback. It's available, and it will be in paperback and hardcover, but buy the ebook because that helps the algorithm, helps push it to the front, and leave a review, leave a comment. If it's shit, say it's shit. If it's great,
it's good.
It's I wrote it. It took me 27 months to write it. I'm not a writer. I'm not a scholar, but I learned. And then I figured out my first, I had two editors in the beginning that I had to 86. I had to fire them because one of them was my good friend, John Romano. Thank you, John, for editing it. But he did it in between the rest of his life, and he couldn't do it to the best of his ability. Then I had a professional editor that worked for the publishing company, and I had to do it myself. So I did most of the editing. It's all my words, polished up a little bit. And it was challenging. Just think about this. One suitcase, a rather large suitcase, can hold about 25 boxes of cigars, and it's going to be about 60 to 70 pounds. That's a lot of merchandise to be traveling with. I ended up, my average trip to the U.S. would be approximately 600 boxes. So that's what I could peddle to my customers. In my 3 weeks, I didn't want to go wholesale. It was all retail, front to front, face to face with all my customers. A lot of cigar smoking. You smoke cigars?
Yeah.
There's something unique about cigar smoking that some people might not understand if they've never done it. First of all, it's very relaxing. It's a kind of a form of meditation, if you will. And there's a male bonding that goes on. When two guys especially, you must smoke a cigar after a meal. Do not smoke on an empty stomach because you can get sick. So two guys eating a meal and then smoking a cigar and talking business, talking sports, whatever it is. It's like an escape. It's a male bonding thing, and women are doing it too.
There's a lot of women, actually.
You know what, Terry? I want to say something. I started writing this book in the year 2000. Right when I gave up the cigars, I built my gym. I expanded it, bought the equipment, saved every penny I could, and which route was I going to go? And I knew my story needed to be told, and I wanted to catch the cigar craze that was going on then. And I knew there was a time limit because humans just go through different phases. And when I started, Cigar Aficionado was like 2 centimeters, a centimeter. And when I finished, it was 5 centimeters. And then it went back down to 0. And I thought my time had passed and I wasn't going to be able to take advantage of the cigar crowd. And lo and behold, my book finished and I noticed it's going on again. It's even bigger than back then. It's the young crowd now, and they're really deep into it. They're really fans and aficionados. They're so deep into it that they're going to enjoy my book because no one can imagine that fucking cigar you smoked in Chicago. You couldn't imagine what it went through to get there. I just had another thought. The movie with Bruce Willis, Pulp Fiction. Do you remember when Christopher Walken explained the watch? What he had to put it up his arse to get the watch to him. That's kind of what it was like. And I never told anybody because they don't care.
Is that why you walk funny when you come?
Yeah, I've got a cigar box. And nobody, they don't give a fuck. So I tell people, these were wealthy men. They get what they get, whether I'm bringing it or if they have to pay triple, they're going to get it either way. And so I brought the boxes to them. They don't want to hear hardship. They don't want to hear complaints. How much does it cost? Work a deal, pay. Everybody goes their fucking way. And I was a service provider. I did it with pride. I did it with morals and ethics. And I think I was a great smuggler and a great cigar salesman.
So as a cigar smuggler, what was the most you earned? Was it?
It was consistent. So it was a 4-year period. And it's to not divulge an entire amount.
Right.
I built a 40,000 square foot building. Now, I did have a Mexican doctor who backed me. It's not cheap to build a 40,000. We had to buy the land, build the property, and furnish it with an entire gym full of equipment. And the other thing that has me a little apprehensive about comparing is 1990 money compared to 2026. Big difference. My wife likes that new Jeep vehicle. It kind of has a pickup truck in the back. And I asked my friend, the boxer Espinosa, he has one. And I said, how much are they new? He said, they're like 80, 90,000. And I said, wow. Back when I was selling cigars, they were probably 11 or 12,000. So it's different money. And I couldn't compare it to today. And my goal was get out without getting caught. And when I got out, I saw people starting to go. There were actual federal cases. There was a big cigar lounge in New York City that was under indictment. There was a big crew in California that were under indictment. And there was a Chicago lawyer. And I always mention his name. It's Richard Mickey Mickey Connor. Richard Mickey Connor. He was an attorney, and he was doing it because it was fun. It was exciting, and he had a beautiful girlfriend in Cuba that he couldn't get in Chicago. Young, beautiful girl. He was traveling back and forth, bringing the cigars. He got arrested with 25 boxes. And like the feds always do, they turned it into a big ordeal and gave him a conspiracy, money laundering, a lot of fraud. And he had a heavy charge, and they offered him a deal. They said, Mickey, you plead guilty. You'll only get probation, but you'll be disbarred. And he said to them, who the f*** do you think you're talking to? I'm a fucking attorney. If I can't beat a lousy cigar case, I don't even deserve to be an attorney.
I love that.
He was found guilty. They gave him 3 years federal time. They disbarred him. They took his house away. Everything he owned was confiscated.
Oh, he should have taken
the deal. And what I said was, he could have eventually appealed that not being able to practice law. And you can also do office law work and not be the person in the front. And his daughter became an attorney. I'm trying to find him. No one knows where he is. And the rumor is that he eventually exiled himself to Cuba, and he's there living there. And
he's making himself silly.
he wrote a book too. Oh, he wrote a book about cigar smuggling. I couldn't imagine it being anything compared to mine, because this was a young professional man that traveled with 25 boxes.
You were doing it properly.
I was doing it properly.
Did you have a thing that you was earning when you was at the top? Was it sort of like, was you earning $1 million? Was you earning millions?
Well, just think about this. Every time I brought 600 boxes, I sold them for an average of $350, let's call it $400 a box. And that was every 4 to 6 weeks. And I did that for 4 years. And there's a lot of expenses, a lot of money. When you're on the street, this is one thing that most people don't understand. A lot of money goes through your hands, but you're spreading it out too. You've got to pay these people along the way. And I also had a load go down. They confiscated in Nogales, the border between Nogales, Mexico, and Nogales, Arizona. I think I already sent your production team some of this stuff. It's a newspaper. I have the Spanish version on the Mexican side and the English version on the American side. It was 4,900 and something cigars. That was a lot. That's a lot of cigars. I could have squeezed more, Terry. I could have done wholesale. I could have kept going. There was no reason for me to stop except for saying enough is enough. My goal was to create a real life. In my book, I talk about when I was young, I saw people who I looked at and they were a somebody. I wanted to be a somebody. A street somebody is not the same as the man who owns a business, the man who, there's a lot of street thugs. They come and go and they have an expiration date. And who are they really in the long run? They're outcasts unless they're extra special. I wanted to be somebody. So I did that. I built that gym chain. I built a fitness company. I gave 8 children a life. They all went to private school. I sacrificed everything I didn't have. Even though I didn't have 8 kids with 8 women, I was involved in every one of their life. To this day, my oldest daughter, she works for me. My kids all went to private schools, good schools, schools that you had to pay to go to. They've all had vacations and trips around the world. So to me, that is an accomplishment. At the end of the day, being a good father, it means more to me than the flash.
Yeah. And obviously you, how long did you manage Marco Antonio Barrera for?
I was with Marco for a long period of his career. Marco, I met him when we were very young. I did his podcast a year ago. I was a very private person. So I want to tell people, if you haven't heard about me and you think it's bullshit, it's just because I wanted to live in the shadows. I didn't want to be loud. I didn't want to be infamous. Because I was once. So I met Marco very young. We on his podcast. I would have never done a podcast before because I don't want to be looked at and pointed at. But now that I'm old, I don't give a fuck. They can say what they want. So I met Marco very young when I was training and managing other fighters. And then we became friends. He started training at my gym. And then I jumped in slowly. I trained him. I advised him. I traveled. I came here to England. I'm going to say 25 years ago, we came to hunt down Nassim.
Right.
Because Golden Boy wanted to put on the second fight. And we came with a $5 million offer. And Nassim doesn't speak to people. He has his brother do all of his bidding. And we went to we came to see Ricky fight in Sheffield. That was the pretext of our trip. But when Golden Boy found out that Ricky had invited us, he said, "You've got to get a hold of Nassim Hamed. We've got to do this second fight. $5 million is the price." That was a lot of money in 2000. I can't remember what year.
Was you with Marco when he fought Nazim the first time?
I was. I wasn't in his corner and wasn't with him, but I knew him.
I was there, Vegas.
You were at that fight. What a brilliant fight.
I got to say, I thought I was disappointed because when I looked at Naz, I thought it was going to be a fucking war. But
everybody thought Marco Naz was going to win.
Absolutely. I mean, schooled him. But from Naz's side, he said obviously he took the fight at short notice. There was obviously a lot of when people lose, there's always a story.
Hey, he was a phenomenal. I loved watching him. I thought he was going to win that fight myself. All fighters have an excuse, whatever, but he could have done the second one, and he could have trained. They would have given him all the time he wanted, and he would have made $5 million. So we saw him. We have pictures with him. I'll send you the pictures. We have pictures with him and his brother, Marco and myself, outside a hotel in Sheffield. We probably took pictures with him at the fight, too, because he was at Ricky's fight. Ricky fought Collazo, I think.
That was a good fight.
Yeah, that was a really good fight. I was front row. Here's something amazing, Terry. I've never paid for a ticket ever in my life. Never had to buy one. And I've been front row in more fights than I can count. And I just feel privileged. It's amazing. And for the British fans and the British, your fans, I accompanied Ricky Hatton and Paul Speak with Marco Barrera and my son. My daughter was there too. We accompanied Ricky Hatton for his induction into the International Boxing Hall of Fame. So I got to spend one full, undivided week with Ricky Hatton. Ricky Hatton was an amazing, funny guy. He could keep a crowd. And I remember I would try and pump him up and support him with different things. And he looked at me once. He said, "Mate, if all I've got to do is talk, I have no problem." When he gave his speech at the Boxing Hall of Fame, he entertained the crowd. He could dazzle a crowd.
He was like a stand-up comedian, wasn't he?
He really was. He could have done it professionally. He spoke. He made a lot of jokes, of fun of himself. He loved to drink beer.
Yeah,
and talk. Eating wasn't that important to him. We drank and joked and had fun, and he loved to make fun of people. We had a brilliant time. I will honor that moment because, as you know, I don't care, love or hate Ricky or what you think of him. He's a fucking massive celebrity, and the people love him. And me, Scott Anthony, how many people can say they spent a fucking week? Undivided attention. Ricky didn't have anything else to do. We ate breakfast, lunch, dinner together every day. And we started drinking at breakfast. So
that sounds like Ricky.
We had an amazing time. It was just amazing. What would a person out there have paid to be in Ricky's presence for a whole week?
Priceless.
Priceless. Absolutely priceless. Poor Paul. Paul had been with him his entire career. And for Paul, it was not priceless. Paul Speak,
it was work.
It was beyond work because Ricky is a hard case. Ricky took it all out on Paul. Everything was Paul's fault. And it was amazing. And Paul Speak and I, we've known each other for over 20 years, and we became great mates. We talk and we send messages, and he started following me. And he is the reason I'm here today because I never told anybody about my story, Terry. And I'm going to say maybe it was stupid, ignorance, innocence. I thought that a criminal can write a great book and maintain anonymous. You just the book is gonna go out there, and the publishers and the bookstores take care of it being good. It couldn't have been further from the truth. I was wrong. And people started telling me, no, you really have to get out there. And I wanted to hide. I don't want to be out there. Because there's going to be some comments and people are going to say, oh, bullshit, or that's so stupid. But it was my life. as stupid as it was, it's my story, and I'm now sharing it. And I sat down with Paul because Marco Barrera had never had a drink in his life. And he started drinking just a few months before we accompanied Ricky. So Marco and Ricky were getting it on. They were in a good rhythm. The atmosphere, there were a lot of people there, and Paul and I were hungry. And Paul and I said, Paul, you want to eat? And he's like, yeah, let's get the fuck out of here. I don't think Paul drinks. And we went and started eating. And Paul, he's such a disarming, honest, honorable man. He, like, Scott, what about your life and this? And I told him, Paul, I was a criminal. You don't say. And I said, yeah. And I started telling him, and he's
I
like,
thought you was a police detective.
Paul was a sergeant of the Manchester Police, and I always respected that. And Paul basically probably thought I was just another version of him. I was Oscar's man. I was Marco's man. I took care of him, and he watched me. I took care of Marco. I traveled with Marco around the world and always took care of him. And we came to the UK, Marco and I together, at least 5 or 6 times. We did Spencer Brown's celebrity dinners, and we went one time. We went to 33 different cities and towns in 15 days with Spencer. Spencer's a great guy. He's a great mate too. And I started telling Paul, and Paul said, Scott, you got to write a book. He said, I could actually. He said, Ricky, there's Ricky's had a book, and I could introduce you to those people. And I said, Paul, I'm already writing my first book, but it's not the intense stuff that I don't ever want to talk about. And he tried to get it out of me, and I couldn't tell him. It probably fell flat, and because I didn't have the passion and the emotion, because real criminals, they don't talk about it. But let me tell you one of the things that inspired me, Michael Francese. He inspired me because I look at him. I was kind of, I don't know the word to describe it in one word, but it wasn't taken well when I was breaking away from the streets. First of all, I speak well, and most of the guys that I was with, I'd have to lower everything to speak like them, because a couple times I used different words and they'd look at me like, oh, big talker. And then when I started pulling away, I would get that bullshit. Yeah, you're better than somebody. You think you're better, too good for us. And especially the deep mob guys, they don't talk about anything. And I watched Michael, and I actually wanted at one point, now through you, I'm going to meet him, but I wanted to send Michael a letter and say, I really like watching him because he's so well-spoken. He's almost monotone. He's like a Don. He could really be a high-level leader because he's diplomatic, he's political, and now that he's not a criminal and he's found the Lord, he speaks about everything. And hey, if he can speak about it, so can I. And lately, I've gotten a couple messages. I got one that was semi-intrusive and threatening, and I sent him back. I said, fuck them. I'm not fucking talking about them. I'm not giving other people's names. I'm talking about what I did and how I did it. And then another person that I know from childhood said, hey, keep your mouth shut. You should stop talking. You get people in trouble. Who? There's a statute of limitations. The only thing in the U.S. that doesn't have a statute of limitations is murder. And I'm not involved in any murders that weren't solved. I had been pulled in several times on murders that had happened because of my involvement with the area or the people, but I don't have that on me. So who gives a fuck about a 62-year-old guy that kicked in doors in 1985? Nobody. And smuggling cigars, yes, I did it. And I repented. I did build a life. There's a happy ending. There is a restructuring of my life. And would you pass me that book? I'd like to say something. This is my book. 257 pages of a real life story. I wrote it. It's got 22 pages, I believe 78 real images from me back then. And I think I'm just blown away, Terry, that Scott Anthony could write a book and that I finished it, because how many people I've heard so many say, I should write a book. I'm going to write a book.
But I never do it.
No one ever does it. And I did it. And now they're kind of like saying, yeah, well, but you and you. No, I'm that fucking guy who was destined for nothing. I'm the guy from the other side of the tracks. I'm the person who maybe wasn't supposed to make it. And somehow I did. And it wasn't easy, but I made it.
If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. Everybody.
Crime is easy, but not to get away with it. And you know, people ask me, it was easy to me, but I had high anxiety. You know, I sit here and talk about it. When I was about to do an armed invasion, we did a lot of home invasions. It is a 50-50 shot that you're going to make it out of their life. You have no guarantees. You are going through a door that you don't know who is on the other side. What if they heard you? What if they're strapped with weapons just waiting for that door to open? Like I used to be 99% of my days. I was ready. I was one of those intense guys. I used to park 3 blocks away from my house and zigzag through other people's backyards and to make sure I'm not followed. And there's no way I was parking a car that anyone could identify in front of where I live so people could kind of break it down. And I never had a car in my name. They were always in somebody else's name. And the beautiful thing is, I didn't even let them know because I only put it in trustworthy people's names in case the police ever confiscated the car. I could go to them and say, Shady, will you go get that car? That's a friend of mine that about 2 years later, he said, you had a f***ing car in my name. You've got 500 parking tickets. I said, I'm sorry. Just the way I operated.
So I've got a question for you. So you've obviously lived the life of organised crime. You've obviously lived the life as a cigar smuggler, as a boxing trainer, as a gym owner. You've obviously managed some amazing fighters in your time. So over your whole life, I've got one question for you.
How much?
No. Can you trust anybody?
Now, that's a difficult question, Terry, and I don't want to offend anybody. I first have to say, I had this, you must have been in my mind because I had this dream at 4:30. I haven't been able to sleep. You know that jet lag?
Was I naked or was I dressed up as a woman?
You were one of these guys over here. There were two of them. You were one of them. And I had that thought this morning. I wasn't really asleep, but almost. And I had that thought. There is one man in my life, my friend Antonio Cordoba Lopez, who I can trust with my fucking life. That guy had laid down in front of harm's way for me more times than I could ever fucking count. If there's anybody in... One person. I have some good friends. I have my friend Stuart. I had my friend Brett. Had my friend Wacker. And I've had, and the Crow Boys, and I've had these people, but they can all only be trusted in a certain facet. Some of them, it might be loose lips. Some of it might be the girlfriend. But my friend Antonio, take a fucking bullet. And one man. But I was snitched on. When I was sitting in prison, you know, first I had that experience with that one childhood friend. We're talking, this motherfucker and I shared the bed together when we were 5 all the way through 28 years old. And I had an opportunity to have him killed in prison because my close mate was calling the shots, and it was the worst prison in Illinois, Pontiac. And if any of you know about it. He up at every prison camp he went to till he got to the worst one. And I had thought about it. He was on my radar. And when he was in there, I found out and I went and I visited my friend with fake IDs. And he just looked at me and said, now this is a guy who had 14 bodies to his credit. And he looked at me and said, how do you want it? I said to him, I don't want it. I can't do it. I said, I wouldn't be killing him. I'd be killing his mother and father. can't do it. And these two were shoulders. The angel and the devil were at war. But I said, I've known him since kindergarten. His mother, his father and I were really good friends. His brothers, his sisters. I said, I don't want to be that person. And I know people could call me out on it. Maybe they'll say I'm a pussy, I'm a coward. Yeah, bring it. Bring it with these, and we'll see what we got going. But I don't want to assassinate a guy I went to kindergarten with. And that's one of the reasons that I said the street is not for me, because violence is often necessary, and sometimes people have to go. And I don't want to be in a world, I don't want to be in an environment where I might kill the person that I went to kindergarten with. And I walked away because it's wrong. And I know there's some really deep, serious people, and that's how they live. And you each do what you got to do, and especially the prison mentality and how they handle things. But my conscience is clean, and everything bad that I did, I have either paid for it with shit that was given back to me, or I buried it with good deeds. I've done a lot of good deeds, and I made it back, and that's why maybe I am the last man standing. Yesterday, my uncle, my uncle Joe Mandarino, he did prison time with that notorious Chicago stud, Joe Ganzi, and he's wanted to see Joe's daughter, and I know Joe's daughter, and I sent her a message yesterday, and I said, you know, he's actually my cousin, but he's old enough to be my uncle. My cousin. He was cellmates with your father, and they were very close, and he wants to see you, and it has to be done. He's pushing me. He must be feeling, he's 84, right. So he must be feeling time is getting near, and he told me, Scott, I'm going to cry. I said, that's okay. I'll probably cry there too, because Joe Ganzi was a legend, and I get to say that I knew him. His daughter and I are friends from many years ago. And I'm going to go there for that and get them together. And I've done a lot of good deeds. And there might be some people that are sore with me, like Aaron, the policeman. Aaron, if you ever see this, I'm sorry. But you didn't get hurt. I kicked in the door. I pulled out the gun. I did it alone. I did it all by myself. I did probably 5 home invasions by myself. I planned them well, started using a big 357, a chrome one, because when I used the little black one, people sometimes didn't see it and I had to hit them or something. So that gun, it was a strong influence. And
that was Dirty Harry's gun, wasn't it?
Yeah. And it intimidated. And I had a saying, and it's in my book a lot. This is a robbery. Don't make it a murder. And I always talk to people, like if anybody was having a breakdown or a meltdown, I would say, just fucking calm down. No one's going to hurt you. We're here for the money. Just calm down. I give you my word. And on my watch, nobody ever got hurt. And I was talking to a friend the other day, and he was a serious guy, and he had done some serious stuff many times with me. And he said, you know, thinking about it, amazing, we're alive. And I said, just think about this. I'm going to call him Mac. So just think about this, Mac. I did 32 home invasion drug robberies, and nobody ever got shot. Nobody ever got hurt. Now, where I come from, the 70s, getting punched in the face is not violence. To me, that's a night out on the town. Actually, it's sometimes more than a night out. It's like the pinnacle of your night, getting a fight, as long as it's clean. So no extreme violence, but other people that... I taught a lot of people how to do this, and people copied me, and there's a couple deaths because they didn't have what I had. They didn't have what it takes. One of my young proteges from the street, James Hayes, he was killed trying to do it. It might have been his first ever that he did, but he said, hey, Scott is doing it. At that time, I was driving a DeLorean. Think about that, the irony, a coke dealer driving a DeLorean. And I only had it, Terry, for about a week, and I quit driving it because those doors opened up, the gull wing doors, and it was just too much attention for me. But I'm redeemed. I built a good life. I haven't and I didn't look back for a long time. But now, for the rest of however long my life is, it's going to be about my books and my stories. I'm already starting a podcast. I don't know. Do you follow WWE wrestling at all? Do you know who El Vampiro is?
I know. I've heard of his name.
He is the first guy to ever pin Hulk Hogan. That's a big deal. He's a legitimate celebrity. Him and I were roommates many years ago. We're roommates now again. And we're starting a podcast together. We've done 3 episodes. And this is the funny thing, Terry. I never thought of myself. I didn't think of these abilities. I'm going to be honest. I always thought of myself, to quote Rocky, as a ham and egger. I didn't think of myself as better than anybody. I thought of myself as less than other people. But there were a few windows into the real world that made me look and say, but he's just a bloke. That's just a guy. What? They're just men. We're all just men. Like they say, we all put on our pants one leg at a time. And a couple people told me over the last year, they say, you're very articulate. You can speak very well and you tell a really good story. And I said, really? They're like, yeah. So I had to watch. You saw that gang documentary I did in Chicago? It's on my website. Can I mention my website?
Yeah, of course.
My handle is Scott Anthony OG, and I have a website and I have all the social media. Social media is new to me. The other day I passed 2,000 followers, and I was like, wow, because I didn't do any of this. I was reserved.
Get a lot bigger, Scott, once you get all these podcasts out and stuff.
Well, the idea is to get my story out there and entertain. And my good friend, John Romano, who edited it, him and I live together, and he's a well-known figure in the bodybuilding world. He has a podcast. He said to me about 15 years ago, he's like, bro, you got to tell your story. I'm like, I don't want to tell my story. He's like, you got to do it. Quit with the fucking guilt. And people tell me all the time, fuck them, fuck those people. Well, I don't really care about it, but I have children. I didn't want to talk about this. It was if I had to coin it with one, it was ugly. It was an ugly period of life, and I do have some shame. And John Romano called me after he saw The Sons of Anarchy, and he said, Scott, you got to tell your story. Your fucking life is better than The Sons of Anarchy. And I'm like, really? What's that about? I don't watch TV really. I started in COVID, so I did see Peaky Blinders, and amazing series. And I love what's the name of that? The Last Kingdom. Have you seen it?
What's it about?
It's about the Vikings in England.
Do you know what? I've not seen it.
It's amazing.
There's so much stuff, though, isn't there?
There's so many of these young, talented actors that now have a platform and an ability because of Netflix that didn't exist when it was just the Hollywood studios and the casting couch. Peaky Blinders was great. I didn't want to see it because I just related it to Pinky. I was like, Pinky Blinders, what does this mean? Absolutely amazing. And he said, you've got to do it. And a few people nudged me a little more, and I said, you know what? I'll do it. And here is the ace up my sleeve. I wrote the books all myself. I didn't really have any help. If they're not as amazing as they would have been if some famous writer wrote them, the studios will make them amazing because I can tell them. And I'll tell you why I wrote this. I'm not going to mention the person's name because I'm not making fun or offending them. He's a gangster and he's well known. He has a big following. And I saw him on an interview, and he's written a few books or published a few books. It's better to say he published a few books. And they asked him about they opened it up and they go, okay, chapter 16, you and Bob were running through the front door. And he's like, yeah, well, you know what? I didn't write the book. They sat me down with somebody, my stories, and I lost, something happened to me in that moment. And I said, I can't be that guy. My book has to be my story because it's coming from here and from here. So I thought, you know what? One of my friends, again, a childhood friend who I gave all those parking tickets to, he works in the Hollywood industry. And he said to me, Scott, when your book is out, I will make sure it gets in the hand of the right people. And so we'll see. But they always need content. They always need a new story. And my story is amazing because poverty and disenfranchisement. I was disenfranchised from an early age. Drug use and abuse and danger in an orphanage, street gang, learning how to read and write and speak and polishing myself. And then going to that next level of criminality. Not everybody can make it. In the beginning, I was just a petty thief. It's all fun and games, but it was a petty thief on a one-way street to nowhere. And when I graduated, I put on my big boy pants and I took it serious. It's no longer fun and games. This is serious because now it's real prison time. Just so people know, kicking in the door of somebody's home is a 50-50 chance it's a death sentence, and it's a guaranteed 15 to 30 years. What would you get in the UK for kicking open someone's door to rob them and entering their residence?
Well, it's aggravated burglary.
It's only an aggravated burglary. In the United States, it's home invasion.
Yeah, aggravated burglary.
With a weapon.
But that's if you took something.
If you tie them up?
If you tie them up, I mean, I don't know what you get, but you probably wouldn't get 30 years.
Yeah.
Probably be 5 or 10, I'd imagine. I don't know.
In the U.S., it would be 15 to 30. And because of the weapons, because of the prior criminal record, because of everything they could figure out. And in the United States, when drugs are involved, they're very, very radical now. They're giving people long sentences. So
I mean, the only good thing is, you know, if you rob a drug dealer, I suppose they're not going to ring the fucking police.
Only one. The first one called the police. I can't remember another one ever calling the police, but the police start hearing about you. Because in my world, in Chicago at that time, cops were tough guys. There was a fine line between criminals and cops. They're tough, hard men. And so they start hearing, and people's brothers are cops, uncles, cousins, neighbors, and they'll make a comment. Hey, did you hear that fucking guy Scott is out there doing home invasions? Who? Yeah, Scotty, the one who used to box over at the boxing club. Yeah. Tell me more about it, because I remember when the armored car happened, and a good friend of mine called me. He was very good friends with a lot of policemen because he owned a tow truck company. So he had a good relationship. He called me and said, they're looking for you. They don't know who you are. He said, I knew when I heard. He said, some German guy, because my father was German, some German guy driving around in a brand new blue Corvette, 1984, brand new Corvette, and he carries a shotgun all the time. And he coached me through it. He talked to them. And I remember he took me to see the cop, and we had a sit down in a meeting, and the cop was like, you're in big fucking trouble, and you better take a couple steps back, and you better figure out what the fuck you're doing, because your name is out there. And then there was another cop that showed up in the thing, and they started talking about someone else, and it was someone I didn't like. And I said, yeah, I know that guy. He goes, send him to me. I'll take a drug pinch. So that kind of stuff happens, and there's negotiations. And a lot of times I know there's a code where criminals don't talk. Bullshit. They got loose lips, some of them. And they'll also love to get somebody out of there that they're either envious of, or they truly hate them, or they're in their way. So what an easy way to get rid of a person that you're not able to get rid of them, maybe violently. You use the police to do it. And a lot of people do that. So my name was going around, and it was getting heavier and heavier. And there is a point where there's no coming back. When you've got bodies under you, it's almost a point of no return, because there's always a family member that wants vengeance. So just think about this, Terry. If your uncle had been killed by somebody when you were 12, and now you're 25 and you're in a bar and you see him and you're with 6 mates, he's getting a beating. 100%. And so I protected, I really got along with almost everybody, unless I was stealing something from them, but mask and the whole gear.
Well, Scotty, I think today's been amazing. I mean, it's been so good hearing your stories. I'm so glad that you've given us a Terry Stone Connection exclusive.
Smoke. And that guy right there.
Yeah. Looks familiar.
That looks familiar.
But Scotty, thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome. Thank
really
you for
good
inviting
to meet you,
me,
my friend.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe. and I will see you on the other side.